Hi, and welcome to my art and fiction channel. I'm Adele, and today I'm going to be reading you a story from this anthology, which was published by Dark Moon Press way back in 2006. The anthology is called Dark of the Night, an Anthology of Shadows, and I'll leave a link down there for Dark Moon Press. You can check them out if you wish to. The story's called The Club, and keep listening to the very end because I've got a little bit more news about this story that you may well want to hear. So, here goes for the story. The Club. "When you face your inner fears," said Jason, tapping his black lacquered fingernails against the glass vinegar bottle, "you either embrace a previously unexplored part of who you really are, or else you completely freak out." There was a brief pause before Claire spoke. "And did you freak out?" Jason tried to appear nonchalant, but then he grinned broadly. "Yeah, too right. The first time was nerve-wracking, but what a rush." The interviewer paused again before asking, "Have you tried it since?" "Several times." Jason dunked a folded chip into the jiggling yellow of fried egg. "Oh, excuse me a minute," he said, neatly setting down his knife and fork. With one confident movement, he extracted his left canine tooth, followed by his matching right tooth. He put these safely inside a tobacco tin lined with a plump cushion of red velvet. A graveyard illumined by a full moon had been carefully painted on the lid. "Did you have those false fangs custom made?" The interviewer flicked a rapid glance at her tiny tape recorder. The red indicator light glowed brightly in the soft shadows of the pub restaurant. "Of course." Jason speared a thick finger of sausage on his fork, then dabbed it in a sticky glob of scarlet ketchup. "Are they sharp?" "Too right. I've accidentally stabbed my lip with them a few times," said Jason, reaching for the mug of steaming cappuccino. "I've got the hang of them now, though." He didn't add that he already regretted the expense. In the light of recent events, the false teeth now seemed rather childish. "Are you sure you don't want anything to eat, Claire? I feel awkward feeding my face while you just have water." The interviewer smiled slightly. She leant back against the varnished dark wood of the tall reproduction settle. The heavy oblong dining table between them was littered with sticky beerings and spilled condiments. Claire carefully avoided brushing the long white sleeves of her white blouse against the debris of earlier diners. "Thank you for asking, but I'm fine with this mineral water." Claire glanced in disgust at the laminated menu, jammed upright between a greasy stainless steel sugar bowl and a brown plastic sauce bottle whose nozzle was encrusted with gunk. The menu was smeared with a splatter of dried strawberry ice cream. "So," said Jason, deftly slicing through a disc of black pudding, "what brings you to Southport?" "You did." Claire smiled faintly, watching the teenager opposite her devour his food with relish. He seemed ravenous. She wondered how often Jason ate a decent meal. Not that this mediocre fry-up matched her idea of culinary competence. "What do you mean?" Jason looked puzzled and chewed more slowly. "What did David tell you?" Claire's manner radiated patience. "He just told me to be here, that a reporter or somebody wanted to meet me." She smiled understandingly and asked, "Do you find David intimidating?" Jason shrugged, then nodded, the cheap tangle of silver amulets around his neck jingling with the movement. "Yeah, a bit. I mean, have you seen him? His fist is the size of my head, you know." Claire's vague smile faded slightly. "Has he ever threatened you? Does he force you to attend his soirees?" No, Jason shook his head vigorously. "But we all know who's in charge, right? I just mean that David isn't the kind you cross." Claire's polite smile returned. She pushed her small, expensive shoulder bag further beneath her carefully folded woolen jacket. Her plain black skirt, worn with low-heeled black leather court shoes, certainly provided visual contrast to Jason's attire. Plus, he was at least 2 decades younger than Claire. Perhaps most of the other diners would simply assume she was his older sister. "Do you work for a newspaper?" The long loop chain which hung from Jason's silver-studded belt rattled as he changed positions on the wooden seat. "No, I'm an independent researcher. I've travelled here to ask you a few questions, that's all." "So how did you hear about me? I mean, it's not like I'm famous or anything." Jason smirked as he used a limp slice of white bread to mop up the remaining baked bean juice. His slim wrists were laden with slither-thin silver bracelets, strands of plaited cotton, and a chunky, complicated watch. A silver bat ring encircled one finger. On his right hand, he wore the insignia of David's private club. Its significance recognisable only to other members or associates. "David mentioned you to me," said Claire. "How did you first meet him?" "He kind of found me. I was working on the fairground. There are not many jobs around Southport other than in hotels, nursing homes and shops, and most of those are part-time or seasonal. Typical seaside town, you know. But I got this fairground job, and one night last summer, David bought a ride." Jason politely placed his knife and fork side by side on his empty plate, handles pointing towards his skin-tight black T-shirt. The rubbery Incubus Succubus logo was peeling badly. He pushed the plate to the outer edge of the soiled table, then wrapped both hands around the foamy cappuccino. Claire prompted, "How did you fall into conversation?" "Because of my goth gear." "You were dressed as you are tonight?" "Pretty much, I suppose." "With the makeup?" "Yeah." "Does David approve of cosmetics?" "I guess." Jason blushed slightly, despite the thick layer of pale foundation which coated his smooth, youthful skin. The purple-black lipstick had smudged slightly at the corners of Jason's luscious mouth. His Egyptian-style eyeliner perfectly emphasised his grey eyes. "David says the makeup makes me look asexual." "Does that please him?" "Yeah, too right." Jason laughed dryly. He gazed at Claire as if she had asked something rather ridiculous. "How well do you know David?" An odd expression flitted through Claire's dark eyes. "I've known him for many years. I know David as well as it's possible to know anyone. But how did David befriend you? How did he draw you to him?" "Well, after we'd talked about music and stuff, after that night at the fairground, I just kept running into him. I'd be in a bar somewhere and suddenly he'd be next to me. Or I'd go to a nightclub and he'd be there. I thought it was just coincidence, but now I know better, of course." "Did David seem glamorous to you?" Jason nodded self-consciously, his dyed black hair sliding around his thin, narrow shoulders. "He knows so much about all sorts of stuff. I can listen to him for ages. And it's not like he won't listen to someone else's opinion either. He actually wants to hear your opinion of everything." "And yet his word is law." "Too right it is. You better believe it. David is totally in control. I guess he has to be." Claire patiently folded her hands in her lap. "How long had you known him before things began to develop?" "About 6 months. David began calling around to my flat to talk about goth music and Hammer films. He knows loads about Victorian romantic literature, plus modern stuff, New Age writers and philosophy. Then he invited me round to his place." "The loft apartment in Liverpool." "You've been there?" Claire nodded slightly. "It's huge, right? It made me feel awkward because my place is such a dump. I felt as if I hardly knew him after all." "I quite understand," said Claire, emanating charm and empathy. "Yet David is a faultless host." Jason grinned and nodded enthusiastically, though he began to wonder just how much he ought to reveal. After all, he didn't even know why this Claire somebody wanted to talk to him anyway. Claire prompted, "You were invited to attend one of David's private soirees soon after this?" Jason nodded, his eyes suddenly wary. "Did you know what was expected of you?" "Theoretically," said Jason slowly. You say you've been to David's place. Can you describe it? A faint chuckle slipped through Claire's toffee-painted lips. Her makeup was conventional but impeccable, like her lovingly groomed honey-toned hair, which was held in a prim ponytail by a broad gold slide. Now you're testing me, but perhaps it's only fair. Claire gave David's exact address, then said, "The interior is open plan and very spacious. 4 black leather couches set around a low Japanese table. White walls, painting and Romanesque statues and sculptures. One of those huge home cinemas, and a massive music centre. I assume you saw the studio spotlights and cameras on tripods?" "They weren't there on my first visit," said Jason defensively. "No?" said Claire too sweetly. "No." After a heavy pause, Jason pointedly asked, "How do you know David? You don't wear the insignia ring." "I'm an associate, not a member. Only members wear the ring." The conversation halted as a young, crop-haired waitress approached their table, a scrunched grey cloth in one gravy-smeared hand. Her lime green uniform was too tight across her bust and stomach. She snatched at Jason's discarded plate, sending his cutlery crashing to the floor. She bent down to retrieve it, flashing Jason an eyeful. Jason ignored her completely, his serious grey eyes fixed on Claire. Once the waitress had strutted away, he asked, "Have you ever attended one of David's soirees?" "No, but I do know what takes place." She smiled faintly. "How did David introduce you to the concept?" Jason laughed nervously. "Cautiously, that's how. Very cautiously. We'd already talked a lot on Gothic horror and symbolism and psychology. I'd talked to David about personal stuff, which I'd never once mentioned to anyone else. It's like he really understands me, you know. Anyway, he just casually dropped the feeding into the conversation one day." "Casually?" "Well, no, but it really seemed casual at the time." "So why do you submit as a donor?" Jason shuffled his biker boots and he squirmed in his seat. He didn't know how to answer this question. It was just too personal, too probing. If Claire really was an associate, then surely none of this was new to her. And why had David wanted him to talk to Claire? She wasn't exactly his ideal companion. He made himself meet Claire's softly smiling face. She seemed to ooze kindness and confidentiality. The flush of humiliating embarrassment receded from his skin. Claire shimmered with an air of sophisticated self-assurance, which left Jason humbly aware of his own deep insecurities. "You enjoyed the experience?" "Yes," whispered Jason, raking her face for any judgmental response. Totally unruffled, Claire continued to faintly smile, though she was very observant of his body language. "Who did you donate for?" "David, of course. Only David, ever." "Did others not request you?" "Yeah, too right, but David forbade it. Have you ever?" "Yes, of course. I understand how donating felt for you. The tenderness, being the sole focus of all that intense attention, the teetering nervousness as you stood on the edge of a life-altering experience. Then you know how it felt when David put me under." Claire smiled knowingly. "He hypnotized you. It can be better that way at first if the donor is nervous." "Not all are as considerate as David, but I do understand how you must have felt. The heat of David's lips on your throat, how his mind filled yours, how the tentacles of his being penetrated your flesh and coiled around your spine and through your solar plexus. I do have experience of sexual ecstasy." Jason was taken aback by Claire's matter-of-fact manner. "Claire," asked the teenager, draining the last of his cold cappuccino, "if you know all of this already, why are you asking me about it? What's this interview for?" "You told me earlier that the first time you donated your psychic energy to David, you panicked. She had deliberately ignored his question. He didn't pretend that he fully understood what had taken place between David and himself, yet he could not deny the rapture he'd found in David's arms. Jason scowled, then said, "Yeah, I hadn't expected the closeness." "You've no dependents, no real family to speak of." "What's it to you?" He was beginning to find her questions irritating. "There's no need to be defensive, Jason. I'm just seeking knowledge of your mind, of your reasons for remaining in service to David." Her questions were cutting too close to the bone. Jason wanted to be out of here, away from this prying interviewer. Claire seemed to fill the air with calm warmth. Her dark eyes sparkled with gentle understanding. Her round face radiated trustworthy friendliness. Jason smiled resignedly, leaning back in his chair. He trailed his finger through a sprinkling of spilled sugar on the tabletop and slowly drew a smiley face in the grains. Then he shook himself alert, puzzled by the uncharacteristic doodle. "When I freaked out that first time, David just held me with his mind somehow. He made all my fear and embarrassment go away. It just went. I felt so safe and wanted, and then I was floating in that feeling. Bliss. Yeah, right. Like it was nothing I'd known before." "You fear its loss?" "Well, don't you? You said that once you'd known it, known what it can do. Hell, Claire, where else can I go after that? After knowing that bliss, you call it, what else is left?" Jason blushed again, unnerved by his own openness. "That is why I am here." He stared blankly at Claire. "What do you mean?" "David told me about you. He said you have a fine mind. You're untrained and vulnerable as yet, but, Jason, you have potential." "What potential?" Claire smiled again. "Surely you don't wish to remain a mere donor of psychic energy for David?" Jason trembled despite his best efforts. It was a combination of anger and uncertainty. "Is that all I am to David? Just food?" "Oh, come. If that was true, I wouldn't be here now. David wouldn't have sent you to me." "Who are you, really?" "The interviewer. It's my job to meet donors who have proved they have potential. You're rather unique, though you can't possibly be aware of that. Most donors serve their sponsors for years before they get this opportunity, if they do so at all." "What opportunity? What sponsor?" "David is your sponsor. He offers you the opportunity to learn how to become as he is." Jason said nothing. His head span with the implications, not just of Claire's words, but also with the secrets which David had told him previously. David was like an overlord to his select circle of companions. People travelled all over the northwest of England at David's invitation. They had arrived at David's plush loft apartment, nervous and expectant, to be greeted like lovers, then seduced by the hypnotic glamour and vibrancy of the core members. Where else could Jason, or those like him, turn to now, having been ensnared by the decadent elegance of David's private soirees? No other caresses could compare with David's delicate entwining of Jason's exposed soul. What did it mean to become as David was? Could Jason really learn how to feed off the psychic energy of other people just as David did? Didn't that make him some kind of vampire? Moreover, what would he do with that extra energy? David had hinted that there was another level of activity within his circle of friends. Think carefully, Jason. My answer is yes. Claire reached for her jacket. There's a price. Just tell me. To demonstrate your commitment, you need to find new donors. Find them. Make them welcome in your home, and then introduce them to David. He'll take charge from there on. You're leaving? Jason watched as Claire slipped her bag over her shoulder and rose to her feet. She switched off the tape recorder and slid it into her bag. Claire nodded just once, smiled meaninglessly and replied, "David awaits me. I too am in his service." Then, without another word, she walked away. Jason stared numbly at the drying crust of foam around the inside rim of his drained coffee cup. What was to become of him? What would become of those innocents he already knew he'd enthrall, then feed upon, like any other predator with his prey? The germinal guilt he felt for them was as dust when compared with his own hunger for David and for David's knowledge. Jason stumbled to his feet and weaved unsteadily around the other tables in the bar restaurant. He pushed open the exit and breathed in the familiar sea air. Instinctively he knew where to go. Southport Promenade would be thronged with strolling summer crowds. So many young people ripe for adventure, eager to make new friends. Now, I promised you a bit extra about the story, didn't I? The character Jason was written long before I started my Artisan-Sorcerer series. However, in the book Rowan, he plays a major part. So this story introduces him before even I knew what he was going to be doing. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story. If you do, click like. And remember to hit the subscribe button. And that'll let you know when all my next stories are due to be released. Okay? Thanks for watching. Bye. See you next week.